Hey, what is going on everybody, and welcome to Fantasia. For today, we're going to be jumping into another session of Epic 7 Now today. Got some more balance adjustment previews for you guys. I know we're a little bit late to the party, but had a really busy week. Thankfully, things are calming down for this weekend. But look at this, guys, 14 heroes, technically a little inflated numbers here. As you can see, we got some duplicates for the specialty changes, but we also have changes to 2 artifacts, and I love those changes as well. So we have Maid Chloe, Little Queen Charlotte, a huge one here. I think she's one of the worst ML5s, honestly, with Savior Aiden being a straight upgrade to her, but we'll talk about her when we get there. Operator Sigret, everyone's most wanted buff here, finally arriving. We have Fumyr, command model Laika as well. We saw her in the Epic 7 World Championships, which was kind of cool temporarily. Tempest Surin, and then we have some specialty changes. Commander Lorina, Researcher Carrot, Mercenary Helga, and Silvertide Christy. Prepare yourselves, guys. It's going to be a really free-to-play friendly update here, and it's going to be very nice. Draco Plate and Unfading Memories also getting a bit of a buff, because, I mean, Sigrid's Scythe is so good compared to Draco Plate, and there's so many better options for rather than Unfading Memories, right? But those will be the last things we cover. Feel free to jump to the timestamps down below if you want to cover specific units and hear my opinions on those. But we're going to start off with Maid Chloe. So Maid Chloe here is getting quite a bit of a change. So she's just straight up not even getting things replaced in her S1. She's just going to get increased combat readiness by 15%, which is wonderful. It's a great way to kind of boost up her turn cycling capabilities. The main problem with Maid Chloe is that she's too slow, and that her cooldowns are relatively long. The next change that's going to be coming up is to her passive, where she used to increase the effect resistance of everyone on her team by 20%, kind of like Shamadra's staff, but now she's going to grant 50% additional damage reduction to all allies. This is not 50% damage reduction. The additional damage refers to things like fixed damage and such, right? Think about Fallen Cecilia's passive, where you're reducing the amount that's inflicted by Ubir's Tooth and 3F and those types of things, okay? This is actually not bad, because we're going to see a change to Operator Sigret, which is going to be kind of a counter to Fallen Cecilia players, right? Myself included. So it is good to have an alternative unit to go for that can reduce this type of fixed damage without, you know, subjecting yourself to barriers and potentially getting nuked. The amount that she recovers by her passive healing every time she takes a turn is also increased. This is going to synergize quite well with her gaining combat readiness for her turn cycling, right? Which is really good. The other thing is she is going to revive all allies with 10% additional health. So instead of 20%, it's now 30%. And instead of giving attack buff to everybody for 3 turns, she's going to be giving a more universally good buff here, because attack buff doesn't really benefit too much for HP scalers, defense scalers, and just tanks overall, but an increased defense buff is kind of huge, right? Especially with the onslaught of more defense scaling units kind of coming out with like Guard Captain Crow and such, right? So this is a good change, and like I mentioned earlier, her turn cycling is something that she really needed improvement on, so the cooldown of her S3 is also being reduced by 1 turn. That, plus the combat readiness gains, plus the passive healing, hopefully will make her able to sustain the team for longer durations. The other thing you'll notice is that she is actually getting a constellation change. She's going from Virgo to a Gemini. If you've ever tried to build a Maid Chloe and you wonder why her effect res is so hard to build, well, it's because Virgos don't awaken into any effect resistance. They awaken into effectiveness for some reason, but Gemini puts her on par with units like Diane and Elena, so she is still going to be relatively squishier, but you can build her much faster, and she does awaken into effect resistance, which should help make building her a lot easier, right? We'll talk about her losing the effect res passive and such later, but I'll be very honest, with things like Bastion of Hope and stuff running around, you don't really need this 20% passive. It's not really going to make a huge difference, although we will see that Smilegate is kind of pushing for a kind of rebalancing of effectiveness and effect resistance, especially in the RTA scene. Alright guys, next up we have Operator Sigret, the most sought after buff for the longest time. I wonder who the next ML5 people are going to go on a tirade about on Stove and Reddit, right? Now that Operator Sigret is buffed, who's the next worst ML5? Well, Little Queen Charlotte also got buffed, but love to know your thoughts. For Operator Sigret though, we are seeing that she is going to give herself an attack buff for 2 turns before she attacks, which is wonderful, right? She's going to attack after getting this, so you no longer need a dedicated attack buff, or you no longer have to use her S3 and such, right, first, to get that attack buff for everybody. So this is nice. And so what you'll do is you'll actually penetrate the target's defense fully. No longer do you have to penetrate by 50% or get the full penetration when they have a barrier, okay? And she no longer scales with her own speed stat too, which is kind of nice, because then you can build her relatively slow, and you can use things like Ahmed, for example, to kind of push her up in terms of combat readiness. You can even use something like Aram as well, right? Nuke someone with Operator Sigret, reset her, push her back up, and nuke somebody again. It's gonna be kind of disgusting. She's a lot more self-sufficient now, which is cool. And when the target is granted a barrier, the overall damage is just gonna be increased, right? Rather than just scaling up the defense penetration, which is very nice. Just keep in mind that Empyrean Ilanov does kind of hurt Operator Sigret here, but she does for any defense penetration unit, right? The amount that's of the damage that's dealt as a baseline is going to be decreased, but that's obviously to balance out the fact that she's always going to be penetrating defense now, and that she's going to deal increased damage when against targets with barriers. So I think the overall damage is probably going to be higher than it was before. We'll have to wait until the multipliers come out when the buffs actually go live and then test it out, but this looks pretty decent and pretty promising, right? She's also going to decrease the combat readiness that she pushes back the opponents by an extra 10%, so it's now 30% instead of 20. A good little change, right? Any little bit helps. And again, they removed the speed scaling here on Obliterate, her S3. They're going to increase the damage dealt, and then give that 10 soul burn to increase the damage that's dealt overall here as well. So that's actually not going to be bad at all. They did remove this one where they extend the duration of the buffs granted by the skill by 1 turn, right? It's not really that good. But yeah, she is still going to increase the attack of all allies for 2 turns though, so you can still S2, you're going to attack buff yourself, you're going to S2, right? Then you're going to S3, give everyone that replenish attack buff, and then you're going to turn cycle around, and she should essentially have, I believe, an attack buff permanently just through her own skill set, which is really, really nice. Again, self-sufficiency for Operator Sigret is kind of huge. Alright, but I don't know if this is going to be the thing that she really needs. She's going to be way better at her job though, and I'm kind of happy to see that she finally got the love that she deserves. Okay, moving on, we got Little Queen Charlotte, one of my favorite ML5s in the game that has been rendered useless ever since Savior Aiden came out. We need more counters to dark units, right? There's not too many direct counters to like dark unit. I mean, I guess Savior Aiden, but dark units are so tanky, right? You have like Fallen Cecilia and stuff running around. You have really tanky dark units as well, that are Soul Weavers, that are Knights, that are Warriors and such. I know light units have been getting a lot of love from Smilegate lately. And I do hope that they make a dark unit that kind of resembles like Little Queen Charlotte, but like can nuke dark units as well. But we'll see. Little Queen Charlotte, though, is essentially getting this entire thing nuked, and what she's going to have for her passive is, instead of having this 30% damage reduction when suffering a crit, and 15% damage reduction when an ally gets crit, she is now just going to reduce damage, just damage reduction blanket across her team by 20%. Which is really strong. This, by the way, is stronger mitigation than having an Adamant Shield on the team. I think Adamant Shield's only 16% damage reduction on a crit. This is just 20% damage reduction across the board. She is also now going to be immune to debuffs which prevent movement, which means, finally, Little Queen Charlotte cannot be controlled by sleep, by stun, by fear. She can still be provoked and stuff like that to kind of, you know, waste her turns and things. But overall, this is huge. This is amazing. The problem with Little Queen Charlotte was, one, she was slow, and two, if you didn't build her with effect res, even if you did, you're probably going to get debuffed by your opponent's high effectiveness units, and you're gonna lose your turn, and she needs her turn. It's so critical that you get that S3 nuke off, and that you finish off your opponent, right? That is her entire role, is to go for one shot, one kill. But hopefully this will help her, right, along the lines of getting to that situation where she can actually take her own turn. The other thing is, every time that an ally is attacked, she increases combat readiness by 20%. Remember what I just said about the problem before being she can never take her turn? This is now hopefully going to be fixed. This is different than the old passive, where whenever she got crit, she increased the combat readiness by 15%. Really outdated passive there. Glad it's updated now to everybody. If your team's hit by an AoE, she jumps up 40%. This is huge. It's kind of like Empyrean Ilanov. Just think about how fast she turns cycles, right? It's kind of crazy. But yeah, the fact that critical hits are not mandatory for this passive to work is amazing. A lot of units right now don't deal crits, and they deal a lot of fixed damage and things like that, which, by the way, the damage reduction does help with. So, moving on here, we got her S3. Now, her old S3 is when you hit a dark elemental unit, increase your damage dealt, and you get some splash damage proportional to your attack to all enemies except for the person that you hit, right? 20 souls get you an extra turn. That's all going to be scrapped. Now, she just deals additional damage proportional to to her own attack to all enemies except for the target, right? You do not have to hit a dark unit now, which is amazing, okay? Now, when you attack a dark unit, though, you still get that increased damage dealt. She's still going to be a really good counter into those dark tanky units, right? Which is really nice. But no longer is this splash damage tied to the fact that you have to hit a dark elemental opponent. The other cool thing is that when you soul burn this, you decrease your skill cooldown by 2 turns. Little Queen Charlotte's problem is that her S1, it gets her immunity and stuff. It's kind of cool. It's not bad, but it does not really hit that hard, and it doesn't really give any other huge beneficial effects, right? And you just have to wait and wait and wait, and after her first nuke, you just really, you hope that she could stay alive long enough to get that second one off. Now, with how much she can turn cycle, and with this soul burn being very cheap as well, only 10 souls, you can decrease your skill cooldowns and just keep throwing out S3s pretty much like every other turn, which is absolutely amazing. She's gonna be a powerhouse DPS unit, especially because you can't stop her with stuns and sleeps and such, right? Incredible stuff. Can't wait to use her. She's honestly the one I'm the most excited for as of right now. Moving on, we got Fumyr, and boy oh boy, look at this, she got an absolute rework here. Fumyr was just really weird with elemental conditions. I've always been a proponent of these elemental conditions they put on units always suck. That's why young Senya, you pretty much almost never see her nowadays, except for defense teams where you can safely put like a Mort with her. It's so hard to draft her in RTA, it really is. But we're seeing the same change here with Fumyr, where they're taking away the elemental restrictions, right? So now what's going to happen is she does increase combat readiness of the ally with the highest combat readiness except for herself, which is pretty good. And at the start of the battle, she's now a focused based unit. One of the things I hated with this elemental wisdom is that it doesn't have a tracker that like you can keep track of. You have to just kind of mentally keep track of it. So after the first time she procs this 3 stacks of elemental wisdom, you kind of lose track of how many more stacks she has. Now you have a focus meter, which is great. Keep in mind you are counted by Solitaria then, in this case, and ML Politis as well, but I think it's for the better. You gain 1 focus for each ally's element, so at the start of the battle you could potentially gain 4 focus, right, if you have 4 different elements on your team. This doesn't say it's limited to RGB, so I guess light and darks do count too. And at the start of the turn you gain a focus, and after attacking, if your focus is full, you can consume all of it and activate Fruit of Knowledge. So what this essentially means is that you can start with 4 focus, you take your turn with Fumyr, you have 5 focus, and then after you use your skill, boom, you activate Fruit of Knowledge. That's amazing, right? And Fruit of Knowledge hasn't really changed, I don't think. It's stayed the same, even though they put the text in red here. But yeah, none of that has changed here. 100% to inflict sleep for 2 turns, 85% chance to inflict decreased defense for 2 turns, right? Pretty good stuff. 2-turn sleep is incredibly strong. Just keep in mind that people can be woken up from sleep, so you don't want to really hit them with AoEs. You want to go in with a really strong finisher while they're vulnerable. But sleep does decrease evasion by 100%, so it's a really good counter. She's actually a decent counter now to all the new evasion units that are out, namely Setsuka and all the evasion she brings to her team. Next up is her sensory dissection, and what she does here is now she'll attack the enemy, dispel 2 buffs before increasing skill cooldowns by 1 turn and decreasing combat readiness by 20%. She also inflicts 2,000 additional damage for each focus that she has. This is an increase overall, so if you get 5 focus, that's going to be 10k damage, right? It's going to be up from the 9,000 that she used to have here. She used to stack 3,000 additional damage with every elemental wisdom, and the max amount of elemental wisdom was 3, so you get 9,000. Here, 2,000 for each, 5 focus stacks, you can go up to 10,000 damage, right? Really, really nice. The Soulburn, though, used to ignore effect resistance. Nowadays, it's just going to give her an extra turn with the 20 souls. Also, she is going to have her constellation change from Taurus over to Pisces. This is actually a pretty decent change overall because the Pisces star sign actually has, I think, 120 base speed and Taurus has 115. So you're getting a higher base speed here, which allows you to build her a bit faster, which synergizes with her kit, right? Gaining focus at the start of her turn. But also, Taurus is usually used for like tanky, debuffer, mixed kind of units. Pretty much every like ice mage out there is like a Taurus element for some reason. You awaken into both effectiveness and effect resistance, 18% in both. Pisces is like Festive Ida, right? So she's a very common unit right now in the meta, so you can kind of compare stats of Fumyr to her. Yeah, you can build a very, very tanky Fumyr that's hard to deal with, who's dealing fixed damage, who's able to gain focus, right? That's actually not that bad. She's a pretty good support unit at this point. She does have a little bit of burst damage, but be careful because Fallen Cecilia and now Maid Chloe can sort of counter that fixed damage. I think she has good potential now, and I'm not looking forward to fighting her with the 2-turn sleeps that she will inflict, right? Moving on, let's go ahead and take a look at command model Laika. She has actually a really small tweak. This strike order that she has where she targets an enemy, right? Inflicts target for 2 turns. She will now grant increased attack greater to the ally with the highest attack except for the caster for 2 turns. She used to just give a regular attack buff and then decrease skill cooldowns by a turn. Don't know why they removed the decreased skill cooldowns by a turn. I think that was honestly kind of cool, but they're just giving a greater attack buff here, which is not bad. Greater attack buff is, we thought that Ahmed's EE giving a greater attack buff was not going to make that big of a difference, but then it did. Command model, like I guess if you pair her with something like Straze, you can always like S2 and then Straze can like dual attack and then he will be able to push himself up. Maybe that's kind of nice, you give him a greater attack buff, right? And then Benimar's Tachi can proc, or people will figure out something to do with her here. But the main thing is that her EEs have changed, right? This is also kind of a buff, just not directly to her kit. And you can choose either of these EEs to use. So the effect 2, where she decreases buff durations of the target by 1 turn when using her strike order, this S2 skill here. Keep in mind it's single target though. They're kind of removing that and they're replacing it to dispel all buffs from the enemy when using strike order. So not terrible, right? Decrease in buff durations by a turn was fine, because if someone tried to stack barrier with immunity, you'd still bypass that. Here, at the very least, you can get rid of everything, especially with, you know, ARAM and things around, where if you're going first and you're playing aggressive against your opponent, you can still dispel the immunity and then go for the target debuff, right? Which will hopefully increase the damage that you do. I don't think this is really going to be a huge change for command model Laika, though. The problem is that her S3 doesn't really do anything, so we'll talk about that here. The increased damage dealt by volley fire by 10% is now going to be changed as well. So the great thing about this is volley fire is her S3, which is an AoE, right? You're going to attack everybody. So the damage dealt, no one uses this. She's a support unit. It's trash. But now they've kind of moved this effect where you decrease buff durations over to the S3. This is actually pretty significant now because you can now come in against your opponents and strip all the immunity off of them, as well as decrease speed and then also put them to sleep. She might actually now be one of the like openers that people use now and again, right? If some of the more common openers are banned. Now, keep in mind, though, that command model Laika is relatively slow. She only has 114 base speed, which is kind of hard to build up to compete with, like, you know, the super high speeds, you know, 124s, 125s. She does, though, have a 10 speed EE that you can use. All these EEs give 10 speed here at their max roll, which greatly increases her viability, right? Just think about, like, Ahmed and how much more viable she is with just a plus 10 speed EE. So maybe we'll see her now and again, but I don't know if that's going to be, she's going to be a super popular unit, but probably a backup for some people who are trying to shift some speed gears around. Alright, next up we have Tempest Surin, who is getting a little bit of a buff, a small one. Instead of granting stealth for 1 turn, right, she's going to grant stealth and vampirism for 1 turn. Vampirism allows her to heal, right, and I think the only other unit that grants that to the team is Abigail if her passive is procced. The backline unit in your party gets immortality and vampirism, which allows you to heal up your HP. So Tempest Surin here could potentially be okay. You can try to cut your opponent, right, with this 30% increase in combat readiness, and if you got hit and you go into stealth, you can't get hit by single target attacks anymore, and then you have this vampirism, so when you unleash your S3 is going to deal a ton of damage, and hopefully you can heal back up to full. The other great thing is that you now have 100% each to inflict cannot buff for 2 turns and a silence for a turn, which technically means that you could build her really fast. You don't have to build her on lifesteal anymore. Build a speed Tempest Surin, and when you get that stealth, when you get that vampirism, you do have that sustain, but you also can use her as kind of an anti-cleave unit into your opponents, right? She has increased damage dealt on her S3 too. So when you silence your opponent, like let's say your opponent's opener comes in, deals some damage to your team, then Tempest Surin cuts and she goes, now you silence everybody, no one can follow up, and you honestly, if they're squishy, she probably already finished them all off. So very nice changes here. I think very minimal, but very effective. The other thing that you're going to see is that they're changing the exclusive equipment for her first effect, where she would absorb some of the damage as health when using Lunge. Lunge is her skill 1, I believe, and then it's just going to increase Lunge's chance to inflict a bleeding by 20%. Again, not a huge change. I guess they just didn't want this like Tempest Surin to be soloing people with like gaining HP using Lunge and gaining vampirism. Not sure. I think it would have been really funny though to see Tempest Surin solos, but so be it, small gate, right? That's fine. I don't think anyone's really using that EE anyway. People are using the one where you decrease the buff durations of your opponent with the S3 to strip immunities. Alright, moving on, we have changes to specialty change units, right? I'm not really going to go through the Lorina changes. Everyone's pretty much going to be using Commander Lorina, and I'll be doing this for all the other units as well, right? Huge changes to Commander Lorina, by the way. Her passive stays the same, but now she just gets a blanket 50% effect res increase. Seems very confusing, right? But it'll start to make sense as we go down the line. The Spiritual Breakthrough, her S3, they changed it so that the damage dealt increased proportional to the amount of enemies' lost health is going to be changed to damage proportional to a target's max health. The difference is she dealt more damage before when your opponent's HP was lower. And by opponent, I mean you usually use her in PvE against bosses, but now she essentially has like a really strong scaling effect, right? The more HP your opponent has in general, the more damage you're going to deal without having a condition of them already being low on HP. So she's no longer a finisher for your opponents, right? Against your opponent's units. She'll now actually be a really good initiator for damage against tanks and soul weavers. The next thing we see is that, oh boy, I never knew that her runes were this bad, but she was one like the first specialty change units released in the game. She's finally getting some love here. She used to have a increased dual attack chance by 2%, now it's 12%. Already huge because the base is 3%, so now with this it's 15% total chance to dual attack. She will also, instead of increasing attack by 2%, it's going to be 20%. Are you sure Smilegate just didn't forget his 0 from back then? That's ridiculous. That's only 2% attack. The other thing with Guard Rune is that when Spiritual Armament is activated, you increase defense by 5%. Now it's changed to when her effect resistance is 200% or more, the damage suffered in one attack does not exceed 35% of max health when attacked. This is essentially what we have on Midnight Gala Lilius, right? She takes at least 3 hits to take down. And when you have like barriers, when you have damage mitigation in the form of like damage sharing, like Aureus and stuff, it is going to be even better here. So yeah, this is going to be kind of crazy. Now the thing is, you need to build her with effect resistance, which, you know, she gets a little boost in 50% here. It's 150% more you have to find somewhere else, but I'm pretty sure if you're building a base speed Lorina that it can be achievable. We'll also talk about some team comps later though. Sun Rune now increases the damage dealt by Sharp Blow to 10%, up from 2%. What are these numbers here, guys? I don't understand. The crit damage increase by 2% is now changed to increase dual attack chance by 15%. So if you're doing the math, 3 plus 12 plus 15, that's 30% chance to dual attack, almost a 1 in 3 chance that she is going to come in here for some shenanigans, right? That's kind of crazy. The other thing is before, when you defeated your opponent with your S3, you have a 20% chance to reset their cooldown of the skill, but now when you're using your S3, if your effect res is 200 or more, you start penetrating the target's defense by 50%. Yeah, I know, this is honestly Lorina looking kind of more like a PvP unit than a PvE unit now, I'll be very honest. Maybe not RTA material, but definitely I can see people trolling with her in like Guild Wars, and I think she has potential here to be a really hard to kill glass cannon DPS unit, right? The Obscurity Rune is now changed. Instead of a 15% chance to increase combat readiness by an additional 20% when using her S1, now when she uses her S1, she has a 100% chance to recover the health of herself proportional to her attack stat. So if you have an attack buff, a greater attack buff on her, let's say, hey, maybe that's why they buffed Command Model Laika, who knows? When you're dealing that damage, you're going to be recovering HP. It's kind of like Midnight Gala Lilius' S1 as well, right? You recover your health, and then you keep having that damage limit buff on your Midnight Gala Lilius. The difference here is that because this is a rune effect here, where the damage suffered does not exceed 35% of max health, that cannot be stripped like Midnight Gala Lilius' buff. And this cannot be sealed. Numa Luna, Archdemon Shadow, Knockwall, none of these units can come in here and seal this. It does not matter what happens. They still have to DPS down this Commander Lorina, just turn after turn after turn, just smacking damage into her, right? Fixed damage, though, will make things a lot easier, but now we have FCC and Maid Chloe mitigating that damage. Starting to see some potential here with Commander Lorina, just saying. And we're not done yet. The last one, the Glory Rune, is, it got changed, so instead of using her S3, when using it, increases damage dealt against elite or boss monsters by 20%. Now it's just a flat 20% increase. I have a feeling Smilegate is trying to push her to be used in PvP as well. Yeah, I just have a feeling because of all these changes. It is a very welcome change. Commander Lorina has carried everyone's account from the beginning of the game essentially to where they are now, and now she's finally getting the love that she deserves. I can't wait to try and test her out in PvP. Don't know if she's gonna be viable or not, but I can see some potential. Okay. Moving on, we got Carrot. So let's start with Researcher Carrot here with her S1. Instead of a 50% chance to decrease speed for 2 turns, now she has a 75% chance to inflict burn for a turn. That's great because she automatically detonates that burn at the end of the turn, right? Which is wonderful. The other thing is with her Flame Barrier, that's her passive. It used to be at the moment of being attacked, you have a barrier proportional to your attack for a turn, and you inflict burn on the attacker for a turn. Now, you're still inflicting the burn on the attacker, but the moment you're attacked, after you're being attacked, you get an increased attack buff and a barrier, which is proportional to your attack. So the problem with Carrot is that her barrier is pretty good, but it would be an insane barrier when she got an attack buff, right? So now not only are you getting an insane attack buff, but burns scale with your attack stat. So when you're getting this attack buff, your S1 inflicting burn is going to be dealing more damage with the instant detonation coming after it, and her S3, which provides 2 burns, yeah, you're also going to be dealing way more damage with these burns as well. So she's actually going to be kind of a fire unit, no pun intended. One of my favorite specialty changes in the entire game. You guys know how much I used to love Researcher Care. I used to cleave with her and such too. Maybe we'll try that again now that she's got this buff, right? We'll see. But instead of dispelling just 1 buff now with her S3, she now dispels 2 with the, how common barriers and immunity are with stacking at the start of people's turn with protection sets. This is actually very, very welcome. So now if your opponent has a barrier and immunity, you can strip both and then apply your burns. Definitely going to want to build Carrot with a bit of effectiveness nowadays, not just attack and bulk. And then the other thing is she increases her swing chance to inflict burn by 5%, so it's really an 80% chance to inflict a burn here, rather than this 10% increase to decrease speed that she used to have, which wasn't that great of a debuff. Alright, but yeah, that's Researcher Carrot. She essentially just gets better at her job, which I'm not complaining about, because it's pretty decent. She's really strong against low damage teams, and teams that are just kind of more bulky. They don't have ways to really chip down your units, right? Okay, moving on, we got Mercenary Helga. She is a really good Earth support unit. Usually when everyone on your team is an Earth Elemental, you'd have some increased effects for your team, right? Like increased chances of decreased defense, and also other shenanigans, right, that I don't think are seen right here yet. But what she does now, instead of just 60% chance to decrease defense for 2 turns, it's going to be a 75% chance, making her a lot more consistent, which is really key. And I think she's probably going to show up in some sort of PvE type thing that's going to come out in the future, right? But this is actually a really welcome change. Consistency is key with defense breakers, otherwise you're not going to bring them around, right? Bring them along. The attack chain that she has, it used to have a 60% chance to inflict decreased defense for a turn. Oh, sorry, this is the same skill, but this is after Awakening. Yeah, nothing's really changed here. It's just 75% chance to decrease defense. Moving on, sorry about that. The Sun Rune is at the start of the turn. When the HP is 70% or more, you can increase your crit chance for 1 turn. This made it so you can build Helga with just 50% crit rate, but that 70% health mark is really hard to maintain in PvE, especially with bosses hitting so hard nowadays. So now, as long as your health is above half, you have that chance to increase crit chance, which again ties into that consistency that we saw with Mercenary Helga, right? Once you got too low in your HP, you were not hitting crits, maybe you weren't landing defense breaks. This is going to change now, which is great. And then her Wedge Rune is going to change as well. So when using Attack Chain, if all allies are Earth Elemental, you got increased defense break chance by 20%. So this would bring this to an 80% chance. Now this increases to a 100% chance. You start with 75, you increase by 25. Again, consistency is key. Why would you bring Mercenary Helga when you could bring, I don't know, Earth Bellona and still get the 100% chance to AoE defense break? Mercenary Helga is pretty good. She has a lot of synergy with a full Earth team. Hey, who knows, maybe a new Rift or something coming along the lines. But yeah, Mercenary Helga though, now looking kind of good. Still in a PvE role, not anything super major, but definitely appreciated. Next up, we have Christy. Now, we're going to jump straight to Silvertide Christy. And one of the main things that people had requested that they didn't really quite directly address in the 7th anniversary update, where we got all the free on equip and all this other stuff, is that people really wanted Smilegate to rebalance effectiveness and effect resistance. And we're starting to see that with the new frenzy changes in RTA, right? There's a 25% chance that you'll go into a match where every unit gets 100 effect res. And I think that's their way of trying to test counteracting the imbalance between effectiveness and effect resistance. It's so easy to build so much effectiveness and not care, right? Silverblade Armintha, Wrecker and Rowana, you get free combat readiness, you get free attack stats, you get free bulk that you can build, you have turn cycling capabilities, and you have like 300 effectiveness where you can just throw stuns and debuffs out against your opponent, and then you just win. Your opponent can build 300 effect res, but their units need to be fast. They need to try to be tanky as tanky as possible. You know, it's just super hard to keep up. Silvertide Christy now is gonna maybe hopefully change things a little bit. So it used to be that she gave the back row line 50% of her effect res stat. So if you had her at 300 effect res, she'd give the back row 150%. Now she's giving 100% of her effect res. So if you're building her with 300 effect res, the back line gets 300 as well. Huge, huge stuff here, okay? I don't know, oh, the Dragon's Cheer. This thing, when you pop your S3, I was like, why is this here? There's no change. But the Awakened version, right? When you pop your S3, you actually do heal yourself up, which is kind of nice. And they're just increasing the amount that's recovered so that you can heal yourself up. She's usually built with like no speed, so by the time she takes her turn, she is going to be really low on health, right? Normally because she has this Guard rune active, and it used to be essentially an Aureus that's built into her kit. You grant 20% damage share with the backline unit, protecting them. Now it's going to be a 30% damage share, which is absolutely amazing. So if your opponent is, you know, really focusing down that backline unit, let's say, I don't know, a Commander Lorina, you know, just saying, just throwing that out there. If your opponent's trying to fight like your Commander Lorina, you'll be sharing that 30% of the damage. You could put any squishy unit in the back line, like a Tori and stuff as well. You could be building Christy. You don't even need her at like 300 resist anymore. You mainly did that one so she can't get debuff, but two, that you're giving your backline unit enough effect res. Now, even if you're building 250 effect res, like 200 effect res, you still want to try to keep debuffs off Christy for the rest of her kit to work nicely, but this is super nice. Makes it a lot more flexible, right, for your Christy. So you could pair her up with Commander Lorina. That's everyone's first thought. My thought with that is maybe in PvE, maybe in Guild Wars. In RTA, really not so much. Christy doesn't offer enough in those situations. She has no damage. She essentially is just a damage sponge and providing effect res to the backline unit. I can see people using this with Twisted Eidolon Chiron though, with a lot of other bulky, tanky units and just keeping them in the backline. I can definitely see myself using this with high effect res units already, like Bellion, for example, that my build is effect res. You can pair this with Disciplinary Prefect Arya too, to give that effect res aura to the entire team, so you're, you know, essentially immune to debuffs forever now. Yeah, this is kind of nice. You can also build her with lower effect res, like 200, and then bust her out when there's that increase effect resist by 100% to all allies on your team, right? In RTA, if that buff is active in a match, you can bring your Christy in, and she could be a good enough unit to weather the storm of really high effectiveness debuffers, right? Like Witch of the Mere Tenebria and all those other things that are plaguing RTA right now. So again, kind of cool, right? Really do like the change there with Christy. It's simple yet effective. And last but not least, let's go ahead and talk about the two artifact adjustments here. Draco Plate's damage is not going to change here. The main thing is its mitigation. So now when you suffer a critical hit, it's 8 to 16% damage reduction, which is okay. But nowadays that's not going to cut it. So now at base, you're going to be granting between 15 to 30% damage reduction. 30% if you're at plus 30, 15% if you're unenhanced at all. So you're going to be sitting somewhere in the middle. If you had a plus 15 Draco Plate, it used to be 12% mitigation here. If you have a plus 15 Draco Plate now, with this you're going to have 22.5% damage mitigation. So almost a 10% increase in your damage reduction, which is very, very nice for your warriors, right? But keep in mind, this is essentially just more stat sticks for warriors. I think they're trying to promote this because they definitely want to be pushing warriors with that new warrior frenzy where warriors get like 20% defense penetration in RTA. There's a 25% chance that that condition will apply to your match. So perhaps this would be good on a Lilibet. Perhaps this will be good on a Commander Lorina, for example. Who knows? This seems pretty good though now as a damage reduction stat stick, so not too shabby. Next off is Unfading Memories. So it used to increase effect res by 25%, and it heals all allies by 5 to 10% when using a non-attack skill, 7.5% if you're at plus 15, right? Now you're just going to increase the effect res of all allies by 20%, and at the start of your turn you recover the health of all allies from 4 to 8%. You'll recover everyone's HP by 6% if you're at plus 15. Right? And this is actually pretty good. I actually honestly don't think the plus 30 is really necessary here. Plus 15 is way more than good enough. But Unfading Memories now is becoming Maid Chloe's passive, right? This is kind of crazy. So what you can do is you can be slapping this on Soul Weavers now, and you're essentially giving like everyone 20% effect res. You can stack this with Disciplinary Prefect Arya, giving everyone more effect res. Silvertide Christy with more effect res, right? This is very synergistic and will hopefully again help counteract the effectiveness plague that's been around this game for like 7 years now, where effectiveness always has 100% advantage over effect resistance. At 0% effect res and 0% effectiveness always wins 100% of the time, guaranteed, bar 15%, right? So pretty nice to see that they're finally giving effect res some love. But yeah, that is gonna be it for this this video here. Guys, let me know what your favorite change is. Is it the Commander Lorina, right? Is it gonna be Researcher Carrot? Or maybe it's not a specialty change. Maybe you're super hyped for Operator Sigret to demolish my Fallen Cecilia in RTA. Who knows? Me personally though, I think my favorite change is definitely gonna be either like Little Queen Charlotte or Maid Chloe. I think both of them have some pretty nice potential here. But with that being said, guys, thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.